Hey all, so about a year ago I did a poll asking people what my next video should be, and I never got around to making the video, so anyway, here is my top 3 firearm companies I recommend avoiding. Let's get into it. Now, if you like this content, like, sub, shares, all that good stuff, I really appreciate it. Also down below, coupon codes and merch to help support the channel. Now, I want to give a couple clarifications. One, this is not going to be a rant. This is just going to be me objectively going through the companies and giving the reasons why I do not necessarily recommend them. And most of these companies, I've done a video in the past with a lot more detail and pictures and basically elaborating on some issues. I'm not going to elaborate as much here. I'm going to stay objective. So, if you want to hear more about that, chances are there's a video in the past, going further into detail. Anyway, starting out the list is El Paso Saddlery Leather. Now, this one is, most of these companies I'm kind of sad that they're on the list, but this one in particular, I really wanted to like their stuff. El Paso Saddlery is a leather holster company. El Paso Saddlery is a leather company that has been around for a long time. They're in El Paso, Texas, go figure. And I had about 3 or 4 holsters from them at one point, and well, they kind of all had issues. They were just poorly made. Something I've noticed is after doing the videos talking about the issues, I've had a lot of people in the comments section kind of agree with me, stating that basically, yeah, their quality has really gone downhill. They're using very thin leather for a lot of their holsters. The only way you would ever get something good out of them is I did hear some good experiences when people went and ordered like the super high-end stuff that was tooled and real fancy and like, say a full-blown gun belt with, holsters and cartridge loops and stuff like that. I did hear some people say that they still had good experiences, but it definitely seemed like that for the most part, their quality really has gone to hell. I personally had several issues, including holsters being really poorly formed to the point where the guns basically sat in them real floppy. I had issues where, they were cut improperly and they'd leave like the front ends, like the barrel and stuff exposed when they weren't supposed to. And then the final quality issue I had with them was a shoulder rig that I ordered from them, and the thumb brake, it was too long, it was too short. They actually remade it, and they remade it wrong the second time. And basically, I ended up having them argue with me, saying that, well, my gun must just be some custom gun that's too big or too small, or it's a different size, and this whole big thing. And I don't know, it ended up being a whole big thing I did a video on. And finally, when I had said I had had enough, that, they kept basically remaking holsters and they were still, trash. And I said I wanted a refund. I mailed everything back to them promptly, and it took a very long time to get a refund. Again, I did a whole video on that, but it turned into a large fight because they just kept claiming they mailed a check and I never got a check. Finally, after a very long fight, I got a refund. So El Paso Saddlery is on the list of companies I would most certainly avoid. Now, the next company on the list is going to be Henry Repeating Arms. Now, this one is part quality control and then a large part customer service. So Henry is one of the few companies that I've called that when you call in for customer service, sometimes you get Henry and sometimes you get Henry's answering service. And when you get Henry's answering service, you get someone that picks up the phone and asks if you'd like to order a catalog. And then when you ask, no, I'm not interested in a catalog, I need customer service, I have an issue with something, well, they can take your name and number and a little message, and then they'll get back to you. Except they sometimes don't get back to you. Their customer service is pretty bad. When you do finally get to the person, a lot of times I've had them argue with me. I've had, them claim they're going to do something and then not do it. And, just major issues, basically. So now to fully tell those stories, I'll switch over to the quality control issues. So the big one, which is my X model 44 mag, I'll get to in a sec. But first I'll talk about the issue I had with the magazine. So I have a Henry AR-7. I have had 3 Henrys in my life. The little lever action 22 has been fine, and I have my AR-7 that had a magazine issue, and then the X model, which was a dumpster fire. But the AR-7 had it for probably about 10 years, and the magazines basically junked out on me, which a bit premature because the gun really hasn't been shot that much. But the magazine springs had completely worn out to even after only been loaded probably 50 times or less. and they weren't able to cycle the gun. So I contacted Henry, had to fight through the answering service, and then someone told me they were going to send replacements, and then they didn't. So I ended up having to once again call the answering service, get through to Henry finally, and then finally get replacement mags. This whole thing took about a month. Not huge, but now I'll dip into the biggest problem I've had with Henry, which is the X model that I got. So I purchased a brand new X model 44 mag. Real nice gun. Overall looks really nice. Except for the one I got, the receiver on the top was improperly machined. And what I was trying to do was I was trying to put a Henry brand rail on top of that receiver so that I could mount a red dot. And I mounted on, and when I got to the range, I couldn't figure out why, for the life of me, I could not get this thing zeroed. It just was being crazy. And then I start paying attention to the gun, and I realize that the top of the receiver is improperly machined, so it was actually crooked. Like, if this is the top, it was kind of like machined like this with the holes and with everything. So I end up calling Henry, fighting through the answering service, all that. And when I finally get someone, they start arguing with me that because I purchased the rail off Amazon, how do they know that it's an authentic Henry item? And that I just didn't order some Chinese junk. And when I said that I don't think that anyone's ripping off a $30 rail and going to the trouble of exactly copying Henry packaging for a $30 rail, well, they didn't like that. But basically, it was this whole big back and forth, and finally they accepted to take the rifle in. Mailed the rifle in, went through all the trouble, and they sent me back a brand new replacement after they deemed that, you'll never guess, but the top of the receiver was improperly machined, and it was basically, a futile effort to try and zero anything on top of it. And I took that rifle to range, and I thought, okay, here we go. Except that rifle was screwed up and could not stabilize a 240 grain bullet. For those wondering, a 240 grain bullet in 44 mag is basically the equivalent of a 115 or a 124 grain in 9mm. In short, if it can't stabilize a 240 grain bullet, I don't want it. That, coupled with the fact that half the screws in the gun were coming loose, which I could have Loctited, but with the gun sending bullets down range and them keyholing, well, there wasn't really any point in going any further. So at that point, I reached back out to Henry and just kind of said, okay, now this is happening. And I did finally get a refund, and I think it took a couple weeks, maybe about a month, I don't remember, but I did finally get a refund. So I will give Henry props that they did actually eventually refund me. But honestly, with that kind of quality and the attitude and the customer service, I just avoid Henry because it's not worth the hassle, and there's other lever action companies out there that, one, have better customer service, and two, just put out a better product as a whole. So now we move to the third company, the company that everybody expected to be on this list. For anybody that's watched the channel, this is my favorite company to bash, Smith and Wesson. How do I put this? I would never buy a modern Smith & Wesson production firearm. I don't care if it was the last firearm manufacturer on the planet. I have had more issues with this company. And again, this video is not a rant, so I'm not going to turn it into a rant. But when you talk about poor customer service, you talk about poor quality. At one point, I owned 5 modern production Smith & Wesson revolvers, and every single one of them had one issue or another. Mechanical, cosmetic, both. It's all been there. I've had it all. And I actually recently just sold the last modern production Smith & Wesson that I owned. To run off a short list of issues they have: canted barrels, improperly machined frames, MIM parts that aren't properly fitted. Their new sleeved barrel designs aren't going so well. From what I've seen a few videos of them coming loose. I've seen a few videos of the barrel shooting out of the sleeve. Burrs left on parts from machining that should have been removed. Hell, they can't even get laser engraving to be straight. Improperly applied finishes. The list goes on and on. And again, this is not a rant, so I'm not going to turn it into one. But in short, it's a company I would not recommend. And a lot of people, like, I've done videos going into much greater detail than I'm going to go into today. The comment section are filled filled with people backing up what I'm saying and giving their own stories about what they've had issues with. Um, Top that all off with their customer service and the fact that when you send a gun in for repair, it doesn't always get fixed the first time. The final revolver I got rid of from Smith & Wesson was my beloved 329 PD. I really didn't want to get rid of it, but I did. And the reason I got rid of it was because it had been back twice for a trigger reset issue, and it was still happening. After twice back to Smith & Wesson, it was still happening, and I had decided I was done with it. And the crazy thing is, the night that I sold my gun, after I went on Facebook, I saw someone in a posting in a group a picture of their 329 that had blown up, which was a common occurrence with those scandium frame guns, telling me they're not ready for prime time. I will never purchase one of their firearms again, and if you're someone that works hard for your money and likes to be proud with what you buy, I wouldn't recommend it either. So anyway, that is my list. That is 3 companies in the firearm industry that I would not recommend purchasing from. Put down below, have you had experience with these companies? What do you think? Is there other companies that you avoid? But put down below what you think, and have a good day.